So we want to think about how to really solve the problem. One thing that's needed is this kind of new body like the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. That's why it's so part of why it's so important, because there are many crises and it could do something. It does take time. Everybody has to be prepared to say it might take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. But we need to do something. The United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is something that can do it. So if you haven't looked into it that much yet, do that, please. You know, just why not? Get into it. So that's one half. The other half is, what would a body like the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly do? Right now, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now, what could it do? The politicians would have to get together and say, what will it be? How will it be in its original consultative phase? That's what would be approved through the General Assembly somehow. Then there would have to be, this is the subject we're talking about, a definition of the jurisdiction, strictly international jurisdiction of a body like the UNPA. And that could be done. Just as we have in Canada, there are always little problems. Some of them go to the Supreme Court of Canada to resolve. The province says this, the federal government says that. So there can be problems and court resolutions and so on. But there also can be definitions of really strictly international problems that the UNPA would be dealing with, and internal criminal and civil matters the UNPA would not be dealing with. So it's not a unitary approach. The second thing is, what would the UNPA do? The various things that can be done are living within the means of the planet. In other words, we say, okay, there is a resource base of the planet. It can be measured in various ways. It can be measured by the global hectare. So let's allow the measurements to stand, and we want to make sure that we're not going above the 100% level. We're already, since around 1980, we were starting to overuse a bit, so we're now at 120%, 130%, somewhere there. We want to be something under 100% because we want to allow biodiversity and various other things. How can we do it? We can have an expanded Kyoto Protocol. I mean, people know about that. That was a treaty. People know that of course, it has measures in it or ways of thinking about things that are not up to date because they're dealing with, you know, the Kyoto Protocol is dealing with the 1990 levels, and the meeting in Copenhagen, which didn't achieve anything anyway, was, you know, there are a lot of problems with it. One of the problems is there was no general body like the UNPA to deal with it. But in addition to that, there was difficulties working just state by state by state. A true cap and trade system is a second. True means, some people say cap and trade system, they're lousy, they're no good. And the current cap and trade systems, they have a lot of problems in them, but they're not true cap and trade systems where you say the cap has to be at the level of the resources of the planet. So that would be a true cap. So that would be the second method. Another method would be a series of treaties. It's conceivable that different states would get together and say, we want to do something for agriculture, we want to do something for fish, we want to do, you know, and that could be done through a bunch of treaties. The fourth thing that the Vancouver group has been working on, and has it in sufficient detail to show that it's better, I mean, in detail than the others, although the others are good too, is what's called having groups of states, 4 or 5 states, let's say, in one group, and another group, and another group, and another group, and each group will be at similar levels, roughly, of economic development, and the resources of that group would mirror the total planetary system. So if we're at 130% overuse, that's the way each group would be. And then you would have each state in the group would either be a surplus state or a deficit state. That means, and this is a known concept among ecologists, surplus state would be a state that has more resources than it is using. Canada is a surplus state because we have a small population compared to the size of the country, 34 million people, a big country, lots of resources, surplus state. Japan has a lot of people in it and it's a much smaller state, it's a deficit state. If you had both in one group, then the deficit state could, if they were both at similar levels of development, rough, very rough, then the deficit state could sell at a discount within its group. So that would be an attraction to both the surplus state and the deficit state. So that would be another method. Now the fact that there are these 4 methods is important. It means that between the federal body, world federal system of some kind, and the 4 methods, something can be done. We can save the planet. That's the key concept. So what do individuals do? What can I do? What can you do? And there are really the following things involved. You could say 3 things. First, do your voluntary activities. You know, you'll reduce, reuse, recycle. The second thing is, look up the UNPA and see if you want to be able to say, I supported it even before it existed. Support the existence of the UNPA because we need to do something like this to create a world federal body, and that it's only through a world federal body that you could have any of those 4 methods being monitored or supervised or measured or something like that. The third thing is, be politically active within the various groups that would be forming around and in and through the body that would be set up, like the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, being politically active to say, we have to do something about the ecological crisis. Those are the 3 things that I think are required for saving the planet.